Hi, everyone. My name is Gail Peter Borden, and I'm coming to you from my studio in Houston to answer some questions about my work with Galleri Urbane and my upcoming show, Dimensional Iterations. In this show, Dimensional Iterations, I talk about three series or three chapters, which are really about the pursuit of a singular idea, but through three different families of media. Again, as in previous shows, I'm using the painted and resin panels as a kind of primary figure in the show, but this time augmenting it with two additional sets of works. These chapters or kind of bodies of thinking include a series of oil stick drawings, which deal with iterative geometries, so type and variant that describe a kind of substructure to a very primitive form, as well as a three-dimensional series of sculptural pieces, which are somewhere between furniture and sculpture, but use architectural structural lumber as their primary media. But within a consistent dimensional frame and rule set, but that iterate in a systemic logic to have a dialogue, again, with both the oil stick drawings and the resin panels. So amongst these three different bodies of work, two which are two-dimensional and one three-dimensional, was a kind of, again, a synthetic thinking about a way of reducing uh, intellectual and geometric logics to pursue diverse sort of systemic ways of making. So each piece becomes an effectual moment, but it operates as a component in a larger vein of inquiry. I'm always moving between drawing, painting, and three-dimensional thinking. As an architect, I argue my kind of primary medium is space. Material quickly comes into play as the facilitator of form and of the kind of envelope or embodiment of how we perceive space. The paintings have always used projective geometries to produce optical understandings of space, which are then amplified through the intensity of color and their hyper-reflective surfaces. The drawings were an attempt to go away from perspectival into flattened geometric forms and do a deeper dive on dimensional logics within a true two-dimensional system. But even those have a very thick oil stick presence and ultimately become object-like on heavy watercolor paper, which floats in a deep set picture frame. The three-dimensional works are somewhere again between furniture and sculpture, and are about coming off the wall more so than the deep cradled panels and actually engaging full three-dimensional space. They pick up on the module of the panels, so dimensionally they're actually reciprocal objects. They intentionally use the same color palette, but only on operational parts. So there's always a consistent frame, which is the material itself, with a highlighting infill of pigmented coated surfaces. So the dimensional space to the two-dimensional perception of space to the truly two-dimensional geometry of the underlying order systems are all pursued in each of these diverse media, but in a kind of consistent familial sensibility. For me, minimalism has always had a primal sensibility to it. I don't know that I feel distinctly attuned to that term, but the sensibility that it implies is definitively something that resonates with my sort of sense of being and personality and ultimately work. For me, I've argued a reductivism, which is about distilling an essential So, what I argue is that my work is about a new essentialism, an idea of the primal nature of our perceptory capabilities through optical elements like recession of field, color, obviously geometry, and the kind of trappings of light and phenomenology as the ways in which our biological selves, our physical bodies, engage with environment, but also feed a kind of intellectual understanding of what we see and what that means in terms of a kind of cultural creation and a larger contribution to the ongoing sort of dialogues of artistic production. So for me, that sets up a dialogue about how we see versus how we think we see. And painting simulates a kind of realness, and that realness is then perceived intellectually, which again sets up a system or a language, which still engages wonder and ultimately individual interpretation about how that thing is being seen. The reductive nature is about a distillation, a kind of removal of the things that shut down a, an understanding or an interpretation. For me, representational work becomes too specific, and as a result, abstraction is always held much more inclusiveness for politics, social understanding, spatial understanding, and again, the kind of balance between body and mind. Um, the use of these sort of primal elements is almost like a meditative offering. And in a way, I think, though I always love the installations where I see all the works together as a installed environment, I also think they work really well when they go off in the world and join a more chaotic or diverse kind of composition, where each piece becomes a kind of brief portal into a sort of moment of serenity, of clarity, of kind of reductive focus that allows for a contemplative and again almost meditative state to exist that touches at some of the most basic levels of our being and understanding our place in the world and how an object can help assist in our understanding of it. If I could be any animal, what could I be? That's a kind of fun question. I guess I would be maybe a tarsiers. They're a kind of fantastic creature. Their eyes are equal in size to their brains, so there's a kind of balance between their optical abilities to interpret, document, and kind of consume the world, and their intellectual constructs in terms of how they begin to interpret and understand it. Additionally, their eyes don't rotate in their sockets, so they have to swivel their head. So there's a kind of datum point of their perceptory kind of understanding of their own body always being consistently sort of darting with the actual movement of their kind of optical frame. So the sort of consistency and presence of perception as a more standardized frame as opposed to a kind of diverging vantage allows for a kind of intriguing idea about perhaps how to see the world through a kind of otherly balance.